Howdy. If you're watching this around the time that I'm posting it, Merry Christmas. If you're watching it at any other time, Merry. That's what somebody said to me today, and I'm like, yeah, that's a good one. Which just reminded me of when there was a Christmas, an old Christmas tradition of ours in my household growing up. It was for me and my brothers to make paper airplanes. We would decorate them. We would make them super cool. We'd cut them in all these different shapes and stuff like that. Try to find the coolest way. We would just have this competition to make the coolest paper airplane. And then we would fly them into the Christmas tree. And that was how the competition ended. It was just flying them into the Christmas tree. There wasn't a reward or anything, but the point was to try to get it flown in the best too. And then we would leave them there. So that would be part of the Christmas decorations, were the planes that we flew. And the last year that we did it was actually the first year that we had done it in probably 10 years or so. Because it was something I remember doing back when we lived in Burlington, which we moved out of there when I was 7. And then I think we might have done it a couple years at first in Paddock Lake, but we didn't for a time. And I believe it was a year that my middle brother, had been gone. He had moved to Ohio, Florida, maybe it was when he had moved to Florida and then he came back. And either way, so he was back in town for Christmas, and so my oldest brother was over and we all decided to do it again. And it was super fun. Now at this point, we're much older. We were all pot smokers. And I'm pretty sure had smoked even prior, and then decided that we should do this old family tradition again. And my brother, so we all make ours. We're all really excited. We're not looking at each other's as we're making it. And I go and see my oldest brother's, and his says, marijuana, which I thought was very funny. I hadn't ever heard that joke prior. So that's Mary, if you're partaking marijuana. Or Mary wino, as I've been doing. Because everybody there's wine everywhere. And I like the red wine. I drank a lot of wine yesterday as well. In the evening time. Then we had a nice dinner. The thing about wine is that, it gives me a buzz, but it doesn't make me feel drunk. It's not the same how whiskey did me. I don't really ever get drunk off a beer. I don't like that. I'll have a couple beers every once in a while. But if I were trying to feel some type of way, I would drink whiskey. And I would normally only drink enough to start getting tipsy. But I'd feel all loose and goofy. Because that's what whiskey does to me. Where wine makes me feel chill, relaxed, kind of fancy. I'm not promoting it. It's just because I keep drinking it in all of my videos. It's just because it's this time of year, really. I know I argued when I first started drinking wine that a woman should be able to do it every day. And so I've been trying, I've been pushing that, but I digress. I don't think that being given to anything too much is a good idea. I think that everything in moderation is always best. My addict ass would recommend everything in moderation. However, yeah, with wine, it seems even more so than anything else that I've consumed that way. Caffeine, it's very easy for me to abuse caffeine. Pot, it's very easy for me to habitually use pot. But wine just has a different effect. It doesn't seem as potent. Though I'm still not recommending it be done so consistently. Okay. One last one. Okay. A lot of cards came out. I don't know what this read is going to be about. We shall see. Okay, so there's there's an interesting energy going on. There's a lot going on. It seems so quiet. It seems like nothing's going on at all. But that is just part of the process. Like I have said before, we're almost like in this eye of the storm kind of concept. There's a lot. My reading yesterday was deep and quite intense. And then I happened upon a video, like a random video. It was random. I was watching like weird cop videos, and it just happened to be pulled up by the algorithm because of the weird mix of videos that I was watching. So it wasn't something I normally would have ever come upon. And the title of it, I don't remember what the title of it was, but I remember it being very like intriguing. And so I watched it, and it was talking about like this, just where we're at in history, and how like many of the things, now it's something that I resonated with on a personal level from kind of where I've been in my spiritual journey and my personal journey for years now. And so it must be that the timeline is kind of syncing up that way, which is great. I'm prepared for it. The video itself kept talking about how like you thought you were doing something good by, you know, fighting this concept of evil or fighting this concept of evil, only to find that like ultimately those concepts of evil were just leading to something much deeper. And when you removed those concepts of evil from things, like it made way for this deeper evil to come through. And it was like being very ominous. But it, to me, that's, it's like you don't even realize what you've done. And now there's all this stuff going on. But the thing is that like I'm already aware of those things, and I have still chosen to do what I've been doing as intentionally as possible. It's everything I do isn't intentional. I'm a dumbass naturally, right? But I was aware. I was raised in like a fire and brimstone type church. Churches. We went to multiple different churches, and each one of them was very much like it's the end of the world. We're in the end times. Like Armageddon is upon us. The apocalypse is happening now. You know, everybody's about to, the Antichrist is coming. Everybody's about to be either going to heaven or hell. Like this whole thing. Okay. But they were also like deeply theological churches where the theology of the revelation of the Bible was very deeply entwined in the teachings. It was literally part of our everyday practice, was these concepts of the revelation being quite imminent, if not inevitable, yes, but also imminent, and also like, if not like current. So that's just that I've been prepared for this. Like this is, and now the way that I came to it, sorry, my hair is bothering me. The way that I came to that, especially as I moved away from religion, was like viewing essentially these things as a sort of manifest destiny, especially through Zionistic Judaism, Zionistic types of, you know, like the Templars, like Christianity, that are Zionistic at their core. This idea of Zion, you know, that it's all a part of a manifest destiny, that essentially these specific texts were taken out of all of the sacred texts that there had been at one time, especially in a particular time in history. These texts were taken and then implemented a very specific way through the canonization of the Bible, and then taught a certain way in the churches, and then crusaded throughout the world, and kind of became the foundations for a lot of our modern society in all of these different ways. And it all just plays into itself to the degree that, you know, I believe that there is an like apocalypse, Armageddon, Antichrist plot unfolding in our current reality. And I believe that that is a scripted plot that was written by the same families and lineages and powers that have continued to move throughout history to ensure that that plot is being worked out. The whole world's a stage, and this play was pre-written, not just hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, and has been playing into itself in order for these purposes. However, I also have other theories, that go into that, and about us being on a very specific timeline where this is happening. That's really only been around since the mid 1800s. And even more so since the 1900s, but it's all basically the same. It don't really matter. So when I talk about these things, it's not, I don't fully, how do I say it? Because it's not that I don't believe in it. I do believe that it's happening. I believe that that's why we have shadow government, that's why there, has been these elite secret societies and all across the world, and that they're all working together for this exact purpose. I believe most religions at this point in our modern world are involved. All of the politics are involved. I think it's all one big plot, right? Conspiracy. But I really do feel that way. And it's not that that's what I think, is I don't think that this is just by chance happening, and I don't think that this is something so, I think it's almost it's an intent to work against what is truly spiritual. If we were working within our actual spirit on a grand scale, people would be, well, that's part of the apocalypse. People would be being awakened, and they are, but the Armageddon, this plot against that, has been instilled in order to keep those who could be kept away from that awakening, away from it, to subdue those that can be subdued. And as far as the prophecies are concerned, the majority is subduable. It's only, even some of the strongest warriors end up being subdued. It's only the strongest of the strong, the most integral of those with integrity, the most wise of those with any wisdom, the, most perseverant of any of those with any sort of spiritual perseverance, that end up actually succeeding in the very end, to not become subdued, rather. And because when I say success, I'm not talking about only a few people will ever become a millionaire, or only a few people will ever reach their goals and dreams. This is something so much bigger and greater and beyond the individual's dreams and aspirations. But I digress. So it's not that it's not that I believe these things, they're not part of my spiritual practice, but I do believe that they're happening. In fact, I believe they're happening almost in a sort of cohesion with, but opposition to, my own spiritual practice. Much of my spiritual practice is truly a rebellion against those things, which is confusing for many religious, especially Christians, because they inherently see rebellion as that theology given by Lucifer or by Satan, the adversary. If you're in rebellion, then you're opposing, you're being an adversary. And I think that that's part of the brainwashing. I think that if the thing that's being taught to you isn't right and is wrong, it isn't just not right, it is wrong, and it's trying to dissuade people away from their highest power, yeah, I think you should be in rebellion against that. I don't think you should just be given to those things. I think a lot of what has been written into the Bible is part of the script. I think there are sacred aspects of the text, but I don't think that, especially in modern days, you can even recognize those things without the Spirit within you, having the Holy Spirit yourself and being able to interpret those things. I don't think even the most well-intended person going to church every week, listening to the most well-intended pastor, is getting the actual truth if it isn't coming from within them. That is the importance of being connected to one's highest power, right? And like that alignment, and without that, like you're being misled. There's no way you're not, because you're not the one leading yourself. You can lead yourself to the water, and you can lead yourself to drink. But even if other people are leading you to the water, they can't make you drink. And like, even the drinking of it really isn't even the ultimate benefit. It's not just to be able to partake of the living water, but to be able to transmute all things into it, and then to offer it back into all things, completely separate from ourselves, really. Ultimately, like, which goes back into the concept, like, you know, if you're a good religious person just so that you can attain nirvana, or, you know, some sort of sainthood, or so that you can acquire an eternal life in heaven, I think you're missing the point. I think you're missing the entire point, you know. And it's like, I grew up in these churches where, like, these people, like, we were taught about Armageddon, and we were taught about the end of times, and like the whole point was just keeping yourself right and then teaching everybody else how to be right so that everybody can hopefully become saved. But like, that's not the point of any of it. That's not the point of it. It's not, you know, I'm not trying to convert people when I share these things. I'm trying to wake up those that will be woken up. You want to keep sleeping? You want to pull the blanket back over your head? You want to pull the wool back over your eyes because it's more comfortable that way? Because it's cold out there. It's too bright. It's uncomfortable. You want to be that way? That's your choice. I love you. I care about you. I want to see people living their lives and not wasting away. But that is your choice. And like, in love, I let you make that choice. I try to show you the benefits of not being that way, and generally those are the same people that are coming against me, right? I'm up like doing exercising and having a nice coffee and eating breakfast and reading a book and being super productive by 6 a.m., right? Right now we're talking about spiritually, because I'm still getting back into those habits myself in the physical, but you know, and then those that are spiritually asleep are like, no, I want to sleep until noon. And then I want to get up and kind of mosey around and stay in my pajamas until like 2 or 3. And then maybe I'll, you know, shower, and maybe then I'll, you know, go get McDonald's, and, you know, like those types of, like, that type of attitude. I'm not saying that any of that stuff is innately bad, but when you're in the spiritual mindedness of wanting to be lazy, like, then those that are up being productive while you're trying to sleep can come across as kind of annoying. Almost to the point where it's like, you know, if they're like in your room, being productive in your room while you're trying to sleep, you like want to like grab a pillow and throw it at them, right? We're talking about this in a spiritual way. Like, I'm just trying to show you that you don't have to waste your life. But some people are like, no, I know, I want to. And it's like, okay, well, I'm not trying to force you to do anything you don't want to do, right? Then it wouldn't be genuine to begin with. I don't want you to pretend to be a decent person. I don't want you to pretend to have some sort of standards. I don't think I'm better than you just because I'm doing these things. I just think I'm not wasting my life. You want to waste your life, that's fine. But like, I want to, personally, I want to facilitate more. I want things to continue on. I care about sustainability. If you don't, that's okay. I believe that in the end, everything gets broken down and chemicals that aren't carbon go on to exist and transform and transmute into other things and continue on forever. And everything that's carbon completely disintegrates, gets sent into black holes, and gets recreated into everything else. So I don't think that there is any, I don't think it actually matters. Really don't. I think that so much of that idea that all of this is so super important and like the saving of a person's soul, like, I don't believe that. I think a lot of that comes into that manifest destiny shit. I think that generally speaking, it's just, you're only going to have this life as you. You know, maybe you'll come back with your different energies and stuff as they break down, come back in different forms. And that's great and good. But like, why forsake and take advantage of and waste this incredible opportunity to be a human being on Earth at this time? What an incredible time to be alive. What to be a person, you know, like it just, to me, it seems like a waste. And I personally, like, because of the way that I am driven, don't find being wasteful to be enjoyable. But that's me, right? That's probably largely in part because the majority of me is a sustainable product of my experience, right? Like a more sustainable, I've worked to create this sustainability within myself. Back when I was more given to being lazy and hateful and spiteful and bitter and victimized than anything else, I get it. Like I also wanted to continue to be all of those things. But it's the same sort of thing where like when all you put into your stomach is like McDonald's and soda and shit, it creates a flora in your stomach that craves those things. It craves the fats and the sugars. It craves the sodium, and it doesn't seek to break those things down in a healthy way. It doesn't have to. The pre-processed food doesn't need to be processed super hard. So then your body can get kind of lazy. Your stomach can get kind of lazy. Your system can get kind of lazy. And it starts living off of these toxins. And when there's enough toxins in your system, your body it will start rejecting good nutrition. When you eat McDonald's enough, suddenly you don't want to go eat a salad, especially not like a spinach salad, especially if it's not loaded with like a certain kind of dressing. You know, like you're not going to sit there and go eat like raw fruits and vegetables or like lean meats and shit that's been cooked down with like barely any fat in it. It doesn't entice you whatsoever. And when you eat it, it doesn't feel good and it doesn't taste good because there's so much of the toxicity within you that's what your body is now looking for. There's like a turning point. There's a certain balance that if you fall out of that balance, whatever you have the most of is what wants to continue to be sustained. The more and more calories that you eat in a day, you know, like let's say that you're like 200 pounds overweight. Now your body requires like a surplus of thousands of calories in order to maintain that weight. You might not actually want to be maintaining that weight. You might be upset that you're gaining weight, but your body has reached that certain overbalance where now because it has so much weight on it, fat in it, like it requires a certain amount of calories in order to maintain that. And so you'll feel like you're starving even though you just ate fucking 3 Whoppers like 2 hours ago. But your body needs those calories to maintain what it is now. Your body craves that toxicity. That's why it becomes so easy to become addicted to the worst things. It's hard to become addicted to spinach, you know, without the mindset behind it. But that's because that's how those toxins work. Because they're not natural. They're not something you're naturally given to. They're not being properly processed in your body. They become something that you don't normally create. And now your body wants those things in order to continue to sustain itself. It doesn't need that when you're eating spinach because it can receive the benefits from the sun in the plants. You know, so I'm talking about these things now in the physical, but I'm talking about them also in the spiritual. The more you accustom to yourself to staying up super late, sleeping in, not eating well, not exercising, not socializing, not being creative, not, stimulating your intellect, not, any of those types of things, the less given you'll be to those types of things. The more you sit around, binge eating junk food, getting drunk, playing video games, and treating people like shit, the more you're gonna want to do that, because your spiritual and your physical body are both being trained and balanced out in that sort of way. That's the importance of balance. So I'm always talking about these things, and the reason that we're moving into the manifest destiny that we're moving into so quickly, it's like going to hell in a handbasket, because people have gotten to the point where the balance has been so out of balance for long enough that like people are like, yeah, but why would I even want that good thing? So it's sustainable. Who cares? I don't want this to be sustainable. That's where we're at now. I try to talk about sustainable practices and like the ideas and mindsets behind these things and the importance of like being a self-actualized individual. And the response that I get from people is like, yeah, but I don't care if I live or die, and I don't care if the world is here or not. I'm only going to be here this once. Like, people even recognize like that this is a gift. This is the point. This is where all their power lies at this point in time. And they're like, yeah, I just don't care. It's like, and that attitude, like it's so hard, because like even to somebody like me who generally every fiber of my being wants to care, but the more that you're getting that conflict back, that opposition back, the more that it's like, God, do I even care? I'm going to sit here and fight. I'm not going to fight other people to care about things that they just don't care about. But ultimately, like, I don't want to be given to that. If I'm the only one left that I know that isn't given to those things, I don't want to be given to those things that way. Meanwhile, I still am given to different types of things that aren't ultimately sustainable. So I can't judge. I can't judge. And I do think that we, like I said, like because of that balance, like there comes a point where like either you do the thing or you don't. But like by the time that you've been eating so much processed food and what's it called? High fructose corn syrup and all that different types of stuff that you get diabetes, you can actually heal yourself from diabetes. You can. Like, I don't think anything is beyond healing. But at that point is when like you really have to just cut certain things off, up to and including your feet if you don't get on top of it quick enough, and like, so some of those things will come at a great sacrifice, all because you didn't just change your diet, right? But that's where we're at spiritually. And so now people are like, well, I already got diabetes. I already got spiritual diabetes, so like, who cares? I'm just going to keep doing this. I'm just going to keep eating all the sugar and stuff like that. Like, I'm not going to eat something that helps my body process insulin properly. No, I'm just going to keep feeding the sugars at a certain degree to maintain the diabetes. That's what we're doing. And that's what most people do. That's what's so crazy about it, And I don't even think that it's because people aren't properly educated. For a long time, I've felt that way. But like the more and more I see it, I'm like, no, these people know exactly what they're doing. They just don't care. And they don't care because they're so filled with this toxin. It's not sustainable though. And so this is the one thing that I do keep saying, is that because it's not sustainable, I'm not concerned that it's going to last forever. It can't. It won't. It's not sustainable. It's just, do we really need to sacrifice so much in that meantime? And I get it. I'm not judging. I really just want people to consider these things in the same way that I'm considering them. But like, I'm not judging at all those that don't. I mean, I just tried to fall back into a past relationship that already proved to not be good for me multiple times. This dude has already fucked my shit up multiple times. For what? Just to feel in control of my heart for a time? Just to give himself a little bit of an ego trip? He doesn't even give a shit about me. So it can't be giving him that much of an ego trip, to be honest. I think more or less he just knows that his best friend, potentially other partner, whatever they have going on there, is jealous of me in the way that I am infatuated with this dude. And he, in his ego, likes to make that guy jealous. I think it's that basic and that stupid. I know it's definitely not about me. Because if it was, he wouldn't treat me the ways that he has. And just like I'm a dumbass, right? And it's fine. If people treat me like a dumbass, like I've said before, like that says more about you than it says about me. Because then the second I say something smart, it's like, oh, wow, you're actually smart. It's like, that isn't something that just happens and just comes randomly. Like, I'm always smart. I just am who I am. I make the choices that I make. Same as you. Just because I'm willing to be nice to somebody that I know is fucking me over doesn't make me a dumbass. I'm aware that somebody who is given to fucking people over would think I'm a dumbass for that because they're not given to that behavior. I'm aware that learning boundaries is important too, but I'm going to be honest that like a lot of the bitterness and frustration that I've had in my life has come from the fact that I've had to build these boundaries when I don't feel like I should have to. I'm an idealist. In an ideal world, people wouldn't be taking advantage in the ways that make me have to set such boundaries. I'm willing to, but I really let it get pushed every single time because I want people to see like, I don't want there to have to be these boundaries. You're going to sit there and complain about all the discipline in the world and how everything is so terrible and it requires all this stuff and it's this and it's that and it's this and it's that, but then you're acting like this. Like, wake up. Wake up. It's your power that you're putting into these things. Your excuses are what are fueling this reality that you aren't satisfied with. Like, quit doing that. Quit it. Cut it out. But people see me and then they think that they're doing it at my expense. Like, buddy, I'm going to go on and be okay. I've been doing it. I keep doing it. I've done it in every single experience, with every single experience I've had, in every relationship I've had, in everything that's ever been broken down. I did it with my own family. I did it losing my own pets. I did it losing everything I've ever had. And if you're at all aware of it, if you've watched me do that, how are you going to continue to try to play that game with me? Like, and you think I'm a dumbass? And I tell people, like, right off the bat, like, I'm a mirror. So, like, be very careful as to what it is that you choose to see in me. I'm not saying that to, like, protect myself. I'm not saying that I'm an illusion. You know, like, at best. Yeah, I have my own life. I go on and do my own things. When you're not looking in the mirror, do you know what your reflection is doing? It just has to be a couple steps ahead of the game so that it knows when you're going to go look at it. So it can be right there, showing you what you look like. All right, I digress. Let's get to this reading, shall we? Okay. So I have I have 6 cards that came out face up and 4 cards that came face down. This is the way I have it set up. Okay, so the way, actually I just changed it so this is the way I have it set up. Okay, so what I'm getting to read is these 2 cards will be clarified by this card. This card will be clarified by this card. This one by this one. These 2 by this one. And these 2 cards in the middle, the clarifiers in the middle, they're connected and they're talking about a current understanding that needs to be revealed. And the 2 on the ends are talking about the past and the future. The readings that I do are generally on time. They're not timeless readings. They're usually talking about whatever the specific energies that are going on right now are. But the timelessness in of themselves is kind of determinant on where you are in your life and what timeline you choose to be on. I personally believe that even if something is preset for the future, if you get yourself into a certain alignment, you can actually make that happen right now. You could have actually made it happen in the past, not even be aware of it up until the future. Like, there's all these different things that are happening. So, to be said, when I'm talking about the past, the present, and the future, I'm not necessarily talking about yesterday, today, and tomorrow. It kind of all takes on whatever form it means to me personally, whatever it means to you personally. If this is something, and like even if I'm talking about something in the present and it relates to something you experienced in the past, that doesn't necessarily mean that what I'm talking about in the future also already happened, but after that thing that happened in the past. Does that make sense? It could be that like the past happened way, 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 way long ago, or even prior to your existence. The present is your existence. The future is existences beyond yours. Like, it's all sorts of all over the place that way. It really just depends on your capacity, your timeline, wherever you're at in your capacity to kind of alchemize those things, whichever way. I feel like that need to be stated. Okay, so the first two cards that we have coming out are the Eight of Wands in the reverse and Judgment in the reverse. The Eight of Wands in the reverse, well, the Eight of Wands in this deck, I see in the upright as being like having specific passions that one is following, having a crusade of one's own sort of deal, and going wholeheartedly with one's creative passions in one specific direction. Kind of putting all your eggs in one basket sort of deal. In the reverse, I'm seeing it, well, okay, so then Judgment, normally in the upright in this, I'm seeing as, it's a miscalculation of where to put one's energy, of who to worship, how to worship, who to follow, what to think, like how to feel, like those types of things. In the upright, it's a miscalculation of those things. It's almost like people are being, like judgment is being called and the people are very happy about this judgment. But really it's almost at their own, what's the word? Well, it's at their own, like, downfall, essentially, that this judgment is happening. They're just unaware of it initially. That's in this deck specifically. So in the reverse, I'm seeing it kind of reflect the same sort of concept where it's like, be cautious as to where you're putting your energy, what direction you're headed with things. Actually, I'm getting the exact opposite of that. And largely in part, this deck tends to read almost the opposite of the regular Rider-Waite tarot, even though some of the images reflect the Rider-Waite. And it's funny because this is now, the third or fourth time that I've mentioned opposition, this idea of the opposite. So what I'm actually getting out of these two together is to maintain focus, but not just on a whole bunch of different things, and not on anything outside of oneself. So we're not listening to the opinions of others. We're not taking the validation from others. We're not looking to see what everybody else is doing and then doing that. This is really talking about standing in one's own, like standing on one's own 2 feet, thinking with one's own brain, calculating from one's own personal experiences, trusting one's own gut, loving from one's own heart. yeah, and being willing to work those things out, you know, there's a great desire to be validated externally. Whether it's, I just need a little bit of advice. I just need somebody to tell me that this is right. I just want somebody to see that this is going on so that I can feel safe or secure, something like that. But we're talking about not being given to that. That's actually creating like a different idea than what is truly helpful. And like, if you're very clever, you might find ways to do those external things in a way that ends up benefiting you internally. But we're talking about energy as well. And like, that's too much energy transference for what we're about to be moving into. It's best, like, I remember my algebra teacher used to get so frustrated with me because I was not good at algebra. I was not generally given to being very good at math. And it was just, the formulas were so, my ADHD couldn't handle it, right? The formulas were so deep and so they're consistent. You had to learn this and apply this, and then this would move into this, and then this would move into this, and this would move into this, and they all add on to each other. And if you miss out on understanding one of those concepts, you're not going to be able to continue moving forward at some certain point. So like, you have to then go back and make sure that you understand those concepts and continue moving forward. That was all way too much for me, and I struggled with it. But he could not handle how every time, this was in like 7th, 8th grade, how every time that I would hand in homework, and he would actually look at my homework, because like the expectation was, you put how you do your work. I want to see you doing these equations. I want to see the work being done. You can't just come up with the answers until you've at least proven that you understand these theories and like the way, like the theorems and how everything works, these equations. Like, I need to know where you're getting your answers so I can help you when you're wrong, right? And he kept commenting, and he would like even laugh about it. We'd make jokes about it because he's like, I don't understand how you keep getting the right answer, but you're not doing the right work. Like, this isn't the right work. Like, where are you coming up with these answers? Your answer doesn't even match like the work that you've done. Like, where are you getting these answers? And I think he was under the impression that maybe I was cheating somehow and just putting different work. And I cheated a lot in school, so I don't blame him for feeling that way. But ultimately, like, what I was doing was like, I was trying to really do the work for as much as I understood it. It just didn't make sense to me. But I was paying also attention. I really was paying attention. Like, I'd pay attention to like how he would get the answers that he would get. And although somehow these equations weren't working in my head, I could understand, like, I could like kind of guess. And like, it'd be like, oh, I thought it was 13, and be like, oh, it was 14. And at first it was just a matter of guessing, but then I realized that no, those can actually be totally different because of just one tiny little integer in the equation. And I just learned how to assume well, and there was no way for me to like put that down on paper work-wise, my assumptions. They weren't just guesses. They weren't just blind guesses. I had my own equations as to how I was getting to that assumption. But that was all like, that wasn't algebraic. It was my capacity to be able to read things. And I tried to explain to him, I didn't know how to explain it. So I basically was like, he's like, are you just guessing? Like, but how are you doing that? Like, how are you guessing this right? And he was like, okay, well, let's just, and he tried to work very hard with me to help me understand the actual equations. And I would get like kind of stubborn about it and just like make jokes and stuff. And then I remember my oldest brother became my math tutor, and we made even more jokes of it. That helped me to actually understand those things, at least as much as I ever did. But ultimately I just kept failing. I pretty much failed all the way out of algebra, to the point I failed out of algebra half, failed out of algebra 1, had to take algebra 1 again, failed again. So then they gave me like whatever the class for idiots is in regards to that, and I also failed out of that. And at that point they're like, okay. But at that point, like, well, and I changed Christian schools multiple times at that point too, and then was being homeschooled. And by the time I got homeschooled and they saw my history of struggling with algebra, they were like, we're just going to give you another Bible class instead of your math class. And that sufficed for the curriculum. But I digress, because then by the time that I was in my 20s, I realized I didn't know shit and I wanted to know shit. And I needed to learn how these things worked. I'm still not great at it, but like, that is the idea that we're talking about. Like, there's a reason that things are a certain way that they are, and that's to get you to that answer, not just right now, but in the future as well, right? And that's the importance of like being able to trust yourself. But even still, like, you know, I came up with like these certain answers and it was still the certain thing. And like, now we have Common Core where like, it's kind of showing that same concept where like, I wasn't the only idiot out there, like finding a way to get the right answer without doing it the right way. Although I don't think Common Core is even like adding up consistently. It only works for a time. And that was the big thing, that because my algebra teacher was like, you're never going to be able to do calculus. Maybe you can ace algebra. Maybe you can figure it out, which I didn't. But he was like, maybe you can figure that out. But like, as these equations get deeper and more complex, you're going to be lost. You're not going to be able to do those things. However, when I got into quantum theory in my 20s, at first it was the math that really caught me up and made me feel like, oh, these are concepts that are beyond me. But something about it allowed me to engage in that arithmetic a different way than I had prior. And I started to be able to actually understand deeper concepts in mathematics that I hadn't been able to prior. So I don't know. That says a lot about a lot of things. But ultimately, we're talking about trusting your own personal process and not needing this external validation. Because, so we're kind of talking about doing what I did. We're like, what's being asked is not to like constantly have to check your work according to something external. And that's the way that we've done things for so long. So like, it makes it hard for those that aren't given naturally to some sort of spiritual stasis, because they're looking for something externally validatable to say, okay, yes, this is the right thing. And then we go from this direction. It's not giving you street names and addresses. It's like, you'll see a tree that has a weird mark on it and you'll know that tree. And then it's just, just past the giant boulder to across the street from it where you're going to turn. Like, it doesn't seemingly make sense until you're there and you're in it and these things are coming together, and only you personally can really identify these things. Okay, and so those are being clarified by the Ace of Wands in the reverse. Okay, so she's got a wand and she's got her tarot cards. They do. I can't really say it's a girl. And yeah, I mean, that's what we're talking about again, right? Interestingly enough, as I'm sitting here using cards in order to determine these things, but that's the point. And if you've watched the way that I read cards, like, it's not the way that most cards are always getting read. To a degree it is. It's just coming from me. But like, I think we're also talking about moving, it's the end of the year, we're moving into something new. And I think we're talking about kind of moving away from that into something else. Or at least not having to use those things. It's the same thing like your wand. If you're a magician, the wand forever has been, that's where you're pulling your energy from and putting your energy into. It's like a magnetic rod for energy. It helps direct your energy a certain way and to direct it back into a certain way. And that's the whole point, And without your wand, how are you just casting? But if you've ever played like, Morrowind in Skyrim, Oblivion, like those types of games, okay, that's all Elder Scrolls, but like if you've played D&D, those types of things, like there's different ways to express magical output and to take in magical input. The wand becomes something a very specific tool, but your wand could be any number of things. And if you're really a great magician, as long as you can point it at a thing, anything can be a wand. And if you're the best magician, you don't need a wand. Those things come in handy for different things, but like that isn't ultimately the thing that's going, you're the one with the magic, not the wand. But that's an interesting concept because like that's why like witches historically, like as far as like the lore has always been concerned, their magic is contained within their wands. And without their wands, if their wands break and without their wands, they ain't shit. Okay, so like what I was talking about in the beginning, like I had seen that video that was talking about, you know, you destroyed one thing only for it to like become something far worse, essentially sort of idea. But what it was talking about was like, if you defeat, you know, a coven of witches, unbeknownst to yourself, you find that the entity that they were all working for now needs new suppliers for it, right? So like, it's this idea that like once you break the wand, now you've opened the door for the wrath of the witch, right? Which is even worse because now if they find a new wand, you're fucked. Sort of idea. I ain't buying it, to be honest. I'm not afraid of these deep, dark energies. They are within me. I've been below the earth. I've been in the depths. There isn't any of it that I'm not prepared for. As much as I can be. I'm not saying that I'm like stronger than all of it or anything like that, but ultimately like it was funny because this video was like trying to be very ominous and was like, you know, how do you know if this is really the right thing or not? And like, because like because I know myself, because I've been paying attention, because I was trained for this and raised for this. This is what I'm here for. You can tell me things, like I can show you these things, I can tell you different things, but like this is all just my bias, this is all just my words, these are all just my opinions. Like ultimately you still have to come to your own, you know. And so I think that that's what we're talking about here too, is like know yourself so much that like you don't require that external thing. If you happen to listen to me and I happen to teach you something or help you start thinking in a certain way, if it's helpful to you, that's great. But don't idolize me. Don't look at me like I have some power you don't have. If you can receive any power from me, it's because it's yours. It's yours. I'm just opening the door for you for it, right? It's your house. I just opened the door because you're carrying a bunch of bags sort of deal, right? Like it's not like because I opened your door, suddenly it's my house. That's not how it works. Maybe that's why a lot of dudes get so frustrated when you open the doors for them, especially older dudes. Because it's like, oh, what? You're trying to show that you're more in control than I am? It's like, no, I was actually putting myself below you to serve you in order to show you respect. Like, okay, so, you know, don't think that just because somebody's doing something for you that they're below you. But also don't think that just because somebody's done something for you that you're below them. We're all always equal. It's your behavior, your responses to things and stuff that would dictate anything otherwise. And ultimately we still are below. We're all equal. It's the behavior itself that's the problem. You aren't your behaviors. But it's out of your heart that your behaviors will come. Even then, not always. Often we do things that it's like, this isn't even what I want to do. This isn't ultimately serving me. Like I said, it's because we're so toxic. We're out of balance, right? Ultimately, we're all equal. Ultimately, we all have our own gifts, our own powers, and our own everything. And it doesn't matter if you're missing limbs, or if you don't identify as a specific gender, or if you're some specific race, or if you aren't physically, acceptable in some way, or any of that. Like, we're still all equal. We all are equal. We're just different. And it's in recognizing those things too that you can kind of come back into yourself and really be able to embrace yourself. And that's the importance of what we're talking about right now as we move forward. Okay, so then we have the High Priestess in the reverse. This is a really long reading, sorry. I can't shut the fuck up. We have the High Priestess in the reverse. And okay. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how these want to be read. Okay. So we have the High Priestess in the reverse. And then in opposition, we have the Queen of Swords in the upright. You know, one is pink, one is blue. So you can see that there's already this sort of opposition there. One has warm, you know, she's bubblegum, she has donuts, she has soft-baked cookies, she has like these fuzzy creatures, like everything's very soft and warm. And then this Queen of Swords character has like everything's literally made out of ice, and she has a sword. So there's that sense of opposition there. However, the High Priestess is being clarified by the Knight of Wands in the upright. And the Queen of Swords is being clarified by the Queen of Cups in the upright. The High Priestess in the reverse is being clarified by this Knight of Wands. So there's like this idea of like one's empathetic disposition, one's capacity for empathy, being slightly deceitful, working against one's better judgment or best interest, where it's one's capacity to be able to set healthy boundaries, to be able to call certain things out, to be able to like properly address what is and isn't acceptable by one's own receiving. You know, it's not like you get to go around being like, I don't think that that's right, so you don't get to do it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about within one's own self and within one's own personal relationships to say, you know what, this isn't something I'm willing to settle for. This isn't something I can accept. This isn't something I'm okay with. And that actually being the point of love and care that someone is that someone is able to offer. You know, generally there'd be this idea that like, oh, the High Priestess, like, is, like, we're talking about empathy. Like, the High Priestess is so spiritually aware, and that must be, you know, where, like, the Queen of Swords is a little, like, even shallow, or just, like, more cutthroat. But that doesn't make anything innately one way or the other, you know. Like I say in multiple readings, but like these things are like bothing. Your empathy is great. It's a good thing. But in the same idea that like your ego isn't innately evil, or innately negative or innately bad, it's essential. It's very important. It just needs to be healthy. It needs to be within balance. It needs to be treated right. It needs to be used right. It's a tool, not an identification, not the identification of oneself. In that same way, empathy is right in tow with ego. Yeah, it's a good thing. Generally, it's you know, but in the same sort of way, like we think of a psychopath, we're like, oh, if they're not able to be given to any sort of empathy, they must be just a terrible fucking person. We're like, I've met psychopaths. I don't think that they're terrible people. I just think that they're not empathetic people. And I think that they can be very dangerous. But I think that the most dangerous thing is to put empathy on such a pedestal that those that don't have a natural capacity for it feel dehumanized and aren't taught how to make sense of those things and how to move in a direction of empathy, even though they're not given to it naturally. In the same sort of way, I don't think that if somebody's neurodivergent, the best option is to just cater to the divergency. No. What's always been and how it should remain is with a sense of discipline that this is the standard that's being met, but we are considering and understanding the fact that you can't naturally get there the same way that others do. Maybe your discipline needs to look different. Maybe your standards need to look different. Maybe the way that I love and care for you needs to look different, but we still all need to reach this certain standard, and everybody can. Just because somebody has a mental disability, just because somebody's like developmentally disabled to any degree, like doesn't mean that they can't attain a certain standard of being a normal person. And that's the idea. If you start seeing somebody being psychopathic and you treat them like a monster instead of helping them secure some sense of humanity, you're just driving them in that direction. You know what I mean? If your child is struggling with social interactions, trying to change the whole world to make a space for them is counterintuitive. When like you're just limiting them. You're limiting them. The world isn't. The world isn't the one that has that issue. The child does. And so it's important to come to that child's space and to help them learn how to create this space for themselves so that they can integrate themselves properly into the rest of the world. So sometimes like empathy can be misleading. And in this way, we're seeing that like, yeah, it's the same. I saw a meme the other day that was making fun of the idea that Cain and Abel, okay? We know the Bible story where Cain killed Abel, right? His brother. Cain was a gardener and essentially a vegetarian. Doesn't actually say that, but his whole thing was vegetables and fruits and growing that type of food, where Abel was a shepherd and his sacrifices, Cain's sacrifices, Abel's sacrifices to God were sheep, goats. That's what God had asked for. So that's what Cain was expected to give, even though Cain was a gardener. Cain didn't have those sheep. So every time that God wanted to sacrifice, Abel was supposed to sacrifice his best sheep or goat, and then Cain was supposed to sacrifice the second best sheep or goat. At one point, Cain was like, this doesn't even make any sense. I'm the oldest brother. I'm doing all of this work to create these fruits and vegetables, to grow these fruits and vegetables. Why am I giving God the second best sacrifice when I could give him the best out of what I have personally, right? And, then he tries it. He tries to sacrifice vegetables, and God doesn't like that because God is a violent, meat-eating, bloodthirsty being, and that creates a whole realm of issues, right? But this meme said something where it was like, of course, the first murder was committed by a vegan. And it's like kind of that idea, though, where like ultimately, like I think veganism is a good idea. I think that's when we're talking about sustainability, I don't think that our meat industry is terribly sustainable. But I also don't think that most vegan food you go and get that was still crafted in a fucking factory made out of not shit that's real is sustainable either. I think that growing your own food, knowing how to hunt and fish, knowing how to make clothing out of the things that you have access to, that's the most sustainable thing. It's a balance. And so that's kind of what we're talking about is that balance. Because like this Knight of Wands underneath the empathy would normally be given to a sense of balance. This is a nature being that's in tune with nature, right? And they're kind of working together with nature. But there's this suspectness about it. There's this paranoia that comes in with that where like, now I see that, nature needs to be protected, and now I've become a monster in order to protect these natural things. And so, it's very important because empathy is often used. I mean, empathy really is right in tow with ego. It is. If it's natural, if you just naturally empathize with somebody and something, great. If your ego, it just comes out naturally because it's part of your personality, like that is what your personality is, like that's fine. But the second you start trying to control things with it, you're You're just misdirected. You're misdirecting things, and because you yourself are misdirected. Your empathy isn't meant to control things. And so the second you start doing that, well, now you're basically, that's what covert narcissism is. You know, like, you think you're so great because you're so empathetic, but like, you're really just like loving, you know, not loving because it's important to love always, but like, you're like catering now to the depravity of people that really need a stern discipline in order to not be so depraved. You know, you're coddling toxic behaviors instead of cutting them out, or instead of putting them in their place. You know, and that's why this Queen of Cups isn't under, which, you know, she's got a little baby on her lap. And she's like got this very kind face where she's like looking at this baby very sweetly. And that's why it's not under the High Priestess in reverse, because it's under the Queen of Swords in the upright, because we're not talking about using our empathy to coddle things. We're talking about using our common sense to care for things properly. You know, this is a baby. We're recognizing that this is something very important, and that, like, you spare the rod, you spoil the child, right? Like, then again, we're also not talking about giving the rod that way, because this Knight of Wands is under the High Priestess in the reverse. So we're not talking about having to instill discipline as much as we're talking about embracing it within ourselves, so then it becomes a natural aspect of how we are caring for others. You know, it's a hard balance. I know when I first started trying to learn how to set boundaries, I just kind of essentially became a bitch. And I still, no, I've gotten better about it. Every once in a while, it still comes out a bit. I just kind of am a bitch, probably. But at first, it was a real struggle for me, because that wasn't what I wanted at all. And so it was almost like, how dare you put me in a space to have to set a boundary, because it's not what I want. So now I'm mad, and now I'm being a bitch because I feel like you're, like, this is your fault. Once I started taking better responsibility for myself and for the things I was catering to and the boundaries I hadn't set prior. And it was like, even if I didn't know any better, and that other person knew that I didn't know any better, so they intentionally were trying to take advantage, that's still like, thank you for teaching me. Because now I see that. Now I see that, like, other people could see that in me and were willing to take advantage. Now I know how to protect myself better, right? So it's not something to, like, become defensive about. It's something to embrace and look forward with, so that you can be gentle without being weak, right? So that you can be vulnerable without becoming a victim. All right, and then the final two, interestingly enough, the final two cards that we have is the Ten of Swords and the Nine of Wands. And they actually look quite similar to me, these cards. I know that they're in the reverse of one another. The Nine of Wands, yeah, the Nine of Wands is in the reverse. However, if you can see, like, there's both blue backgrounds here, and then the other backgrounds up here. And then there's all these different sticks, and then you got this character that's kind of this shaped, and this character that's kind of this shaped. Okay, so I'm seeing them resembling each other that way. Okay, so first I'm getting, like, the Ten of Swords is normally a card of, like, feeling completely defeated, but this guy don't look defeated. He's smirking and smiling, and he has multiple eyes, and he looks very intimidating that way. He looks scary, actually, because he's like sitting like this, like, he's got all these swords in his back, and he's like, what, you got more? That's all you got? Right? And then you see this poor guy, you know, who he's like sweating because there's fire behind him. He's made out of snow. There's this dog that's made out of fire that's, like, touching him, and it's melting his leg. And, like, he's trying to be so kind. Like, he's got his stick. He could be shooing the dog away, but he's not. his other sticks are on fire, right? His other wands are even on fire, and he's still like not necessarily defending himself or doing anything about it. He's just sweating about it, like, oh no, I'm gonna have to be a little mean now. Oh no, I'm gonna have to set a boundary. And he doesn't seem terribly confident. So what I'm getting from these energies is the willingness to go through things, to recognize, like I said, like even just a minute ago, like to recognize when somebody puts you through something that like they're actually strengthening you. Your oppositions, your adversaries, the adversary is for your strength, is for your greatest good, is far better for you than a coddling of toxic behavior, right? Like, this dude's literally about to melt. He'll completely be disintegrated, all because he's not willing to stand up for himself. Where this person has moved, where like in the future, now that he has all these multiple eyes, you know, and he's embraced his shadow. As you can see, he was white, and now he's dark. He's embraced his shadow. He has all these eyes. He's even got this robe with him. He's clothed himself in a different way. There's these different levels of protection that he's learned. But he's also learned this confidence to be able to be like, oh, I know now. I know now that I know when to say something, how to stand up, and when to do something. So, like, I can keep taking it. Like, I can take on so much more than I ever used to. I mean, before my world was on fire and I was melting in it. Now, like, sticking the 11th sword in my back. I don't give a fuck, you know? So we're talking about gaining this sort of confidence to be able to move forward as we know ourselves. And I'm almost out of space, so hopefully I can finish this. It's being clarified by the 9 of coins in the upright, which is really truly a sign of being abundant and being carefree, knowing that one's harvest is coming in. This person is in a vineyard. The grapes are all, it's like right at that time of year where it's like just about harvest time. It's a 9 of Pentacles. It's almost the 10 of Pentacles. So it's like we're almost there to the total abundance, and we can kind of rest easy in that, you know, and it's in this comparison. It's not, you know, the 10 of Swords guy isn't like taking these swords and then stabbing somebody else with them either. Like, it's not about having to defend yourself, which is, I think, the lesson being learned in the 9 of Wands in the reverse was like, he wasn't defending himself, and he had to learn how to defend himself in order to get to this space where he no longer has to defend himself. You first acknowledge that you have been victimized, and then you work through that process so that you are no longer claiming yourself as a victim. But until you're willing to recognize that you have been victimized, you're not going to understand the power exchange that's happening. But ultimately, through this entire process, as we gain this knowledge of ourselves, and as we become actualized in these types of ways, we do reach our abundance. We become secure, and we're able to now have something to offer, not just ourselves, but to others. And that is what's going to end up leading us into the future. It isn't these vain concepts, and I say vain as in not just selfish, but like not sustainable concepts of, well, you know, passion of, you know, worshiping the right thing, the sense of righteousness, of being super empathetic, of, you know, knowing the right equations at any given right time. We're moving into something much deeper and something much greater than that. And we're taking everything that we've learned and we're applying it in a different way. We're no longer on the defense. We're no longer even having to be on the offense. We're not playing that game anymore. That game is being done away with, and now we're in an actual place of peace. Other people might still be playing their game, and that's fine for them. Like I said, like these things like are working on this timeline where like it really just depends on where you are in your timeline. You know, if you're not in this position of being able to be right here, right now, that way, like that's fine. Maybe you're for another time in another place. Like, I'm not trying to say that. Once I'm gone, even this manifest destiny thing, if that takes its course, and the Antichrist is Donald Trump and everything happens, like, or Elon Musk or whatever, you know, like Putin, whatever it is, whatever people think, like, it doesn't ultimately, I mean, all of it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's like what I said in the last video, where, you know, if we're being told to make what we can with what we have. It's not about being arrogant, and it's not about being so arrogant that you're like, oh, I'm never going to be good enough, because that's also arrogance. It's being humble, being resourceful, and being grateful. And then letting those things kind of drive us into this space to be able to release what isn't meant for us and to be able to embrace what is. All right. I'll probably do another one later. I don't know for sure. Gonna try to be productive, but yeah, if it's still the holidays for you, I hope you have great holidays. I hope you enjoy seeing all your friends, family, whatever it is that you're doing. If you're alone, not doing anything, I hope that you give yourself love, care, find a way to enjoy yourself, just to bring yourself to peace, that you can cultivate, you know, a sense of gratefulness in your heart, even when you seemingly have nothing. It's very important, especially as we move into this next year of so much uncertainty. So, you know, be easy, be kind to yourself, and I'll see you soon.